Every time I put a video out, I get comments that I find really interesting that I want to reply to. Someone brought up such a good point, and it seems like a shame that I just get to reply to them. In this case, the comment of the week, it was so refreshing. It was underneath my last video, and this is what it said. I'm wondering if you have suggestions or strategies or could do a video on how to try to repair your relationship with your child when you are the toxic person who has psychologically damaged them. They've cut you out of their life, but you now actually understand and realise and take responsibility for what you did and want to try to rebuild, repair, do anything to have any sort of healthy, positive relationship. You is in capitals, when you are the toxic person. It made me feel a lot of optimism about this person's possible future relationship with her son. My 19-year-old son has gradually been cutting me out of his life over the past several years, and recently, as he went to college, has completely cut ties with me. I have BPD, treatment-resistant depression, anxiety, etc. I didn't know about the BPD or how severe my conditions would become when I made the decision to have a child. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have. Over the years, as he's become more and more distant, I've become more and more aware of how I've unintentionally or uncontrollably done things that have psychologically damaged him throughout his life. 99% due to my own fears that he didn't love me, depending on him for my emotional needs and reassurance, and using guilt and other emotionally toxic behaviours to try to get that reassurance, which a parent shouldn't be asking for from their child anyway. I've done a lot of work to change those behaviours and do a better job in trying to communicate with him, but I think the damage was already done by that point. I tried so hard to be a good mother, and I know I did some things right, and I know I love him with all my heart and really have only ever wanted the best for him. However, I also know now that I was selfish and sick enough to do the awful things I did over the years because I put my own needs before my child's. It's a hard truth to accept, but I do, and I regret it all. And now I'm living with the agony of basically losing my son altogether. I don't know how to even start trying to mend any of it, or if it's even possible. I'd love to hear any strategies or suggestions, or even just a video about the topic in general. Your content resonates with me so much as a survivor of narcissistic abuse, another thing I subjected my son to seeing. I value your insight and hope you might see this and consider it as a future topic. Thank you. I thought, oh great, this is an opportunity to talk to parents about how to make amends with their children, and maybe this is going to change something for a broken relationship. And I say a broken relationship because I guess I'm trying to be realistic, and think that if thousands of people watch this video, maybe one parent is going to be able to consider this advice. And I guess I feel under pressure to get this right. The last video I put out discussed a lady who had put out her own video about her daughter who had cut contact with her. Her whole video was about what a victim she is and how badly she's being treated by her daughter. And we never got to hear the daughter's side of the story, what the daughter was upset with her about. So all the people who watched her video wrote positive comments under it, and presumably some of them joined her club of mothers and maybe fathers, I don't know if it's parents in general, who want to get together and moan about how unfairly they're being treated by their kids. That's the impression I get. All of those parents and parents like them are not going to be receptive to anything I have to say on this video. So I don't want to get my hopes up about any of them. And the fact is that the people who come to me have parents who wouldn't ever take responsibility for themselves. They're not capable of it. It reminds me of Brian Laundrie when I talk about this behaviour. Brian Laundrie and how, he murdered Gabby Petito. I'm not saying that these mothers and fathers are murderers, thankfully, but just how even when he committed suicide, he was still writing down things that weren't true about his motives for murdering her and what actually happened. And what's important about that is just how a narcissist will take to the grave anything that would involve taking responsibility. So if you get upset and think, why won't this person apologize? Why can't they recognize what they've done to me? The reason why is because their whole personality and their whole identity depends on not being responsible for any of the negative things they do. You know, so it's that important to them. It's never about you as the child of parents like this. It's always about them. Having said that, this is a parent who is willing to take responsibility, one of those very rare gems out there. Children who aren't hugged apparently can die from not being hugged. There's been research done into the way the brain develops and how that can be affected by a lack of physical contact. So you actually cause brain damage to your child by not hugging them when they're little. So that's how much we need a relationship with our parents. That never really changes. So if you think, oh, my child is an adult, they don't need me anymore, and that's why they've moved away, they've moved on and they don't really want to talk to me, that's not going to be the case. But what they need is somebody they can trust. A lot of parents think when you become a parent, you'll understand why I did this, and this. That's not my experience. My experience is that when people become parents, they become much more aware of what they don't want to do to their children and much more aware of how awful it was that these various things happened to them because they can't imagine treating their child in the same way. So if you're a parent holding on to hope that when your kid has children, they're going to realize what a great parent you are, then I doubt it. If your child doesn't want to be in touch with you, or if they don't want to speak to you, if they don't want to see you anymore, then there's always going to be a reason for that. Unless your child literally has delusions, you know, maybe they have schizophrenia, they haven't been taking their medication. Although interestingly, there was a study done in 2012 that found that adverse experiences in childhood significantly impacted on the risk of developing schizophrenia and psychosis. They've also found similarities between PTSD and psychosis. And importantly, CPTSD, that's complex PTSD. There's this well-known debate about nature versus nurture, and abusive parents can often cling on to this idea that whoever their children are is just dependent on their genetics and nothing else, you know. Nature is relevant to the brain we're born with. But how we feel about ourselves and how we feel about other people is a result of nurture. It's a result of our experiences with our caregivers as children. Psychopaths are born with a physically different brain from the norm. And yet even they don't have bad intentions towards people. They don't become murderous and dangerous unless they've also had a traumatic experience in early childhood. I've never had a client who isn't in touch with their parents or doesn't want to speak to them or see them, who has some kind of whimsical, ridiculous reason. There's always something solid. So if you're not willing to take responsibility for the damage you've caused to them, then the best thing you could do is let your kid know that you're never going to take responsibility so that they can feel free and they can get over, you know, move on and process all of their grief about the relationship they'll never have with you. If you're caught up in thinking my child doesn't care about me because they're not in touch with me, then your focus is in the wrong place. They are not the parent, you are the parent. So it's not their job to be worrying about you, caring about you, etc. It's your job to do that with them. And what you'll find is that when parents are focused on their children and not on themselves, those children naturally do care. You know, because we all love people when they love us and care for us. It makes them very lovable. So I'm not saying, you know, that that it's good if a parent tries and tries and loves and cares and the kid never gives anything back. That's not good, that's depressing, but it doesn't happen. I've certainly never heard of that. So if you think you're doing that, but your child doesn't want to talk to you, the likelihood is you're not actually doing that, you're kidding yourself. You think you're focusing on your child, but you're actually focusing on you and what you're going to get back. You know, you've got expectations of what you're supposed to get from them, and so you're treating them in a way that's going to hopefully get you that stuff. So it's all transactional. If you have damaged their self-image in how you've responded to them when they've been growing up, then you will have broken the trust that bonds a parent with their child. And the only way to repair it is to acknowledge that it's happened in the first place, to accept that no matter how painful that is. The more humble you can be with your child, the more you can trust them with not being the enemy, the closer you'll be. If you see your child as a teacher who's telling you off, for example, then you're going to have exactly the wrong attitude. You're going to have the exact opposite attitude to the one you need to have, because you're going to be extremely defensive and you're going to be ready to point the finger at them and try to find fault with them rather than own responsibility for yourself. And a lot of parents, that's where things go wrong. When the child says something is hurting them, upsetting them, making them angry or whatever, the adult sees it as that they're being told off. So the adult goes back into their child self. And when they're in that defensive mode, they completely lose track of the true power dynamic. They're feeling like their child is the adult and that they have to lash out to protect themselves. And in reality, the awful thing is they're the one with all the power. And so the child is just getting bullied mercilessly. There are people who have a screaming baby and they attack the child because they believe they're being attacked, because the child is selfishly screaming and won't stop. I think most people who click on a video about how to resolve difficulties in a relationship are hoping for something easy, you know, almost like a point-by-point recipe for creating harmony that doesn't require too much discomfort on their part. And unfortunately, that's just not realistic. If you want to repair the damage to the relationship you have, it's you who has to put in the majority of the work. It's you who has to take responsibility for that. They didn't choose to be born, so they didn't choose to start the relationship with you in the first place. You chose to have a child, or whether it was a mistake or not, whatever, you chose to have a child living in your house and to bring them up. So that means that it's up to you how that relationship goes. Again, there's no other relationship like that. With friends, it's completely different. You're both adults, you both make a choice to be in that friendship. You've both had your own upbringings and your own lives before you met, and you're equipped or you're not equipped to manage what happens between you, but it's nobody's fault if things go wrong. You know, even if one of you is abusive and the other one isn't, it's still the responsibility of that person who's being abused to protect themselves and get out of that relationship. The same is not true for a parent and a child. There's a difference in power. The power between the two of you is not balanced, and it never will be. So even if you think that you have the same amount of power, or even that they have more power than you, think again, because as long as you are seeing things in that way, you're not going to be able to repair the relationship. You were there when this person was born, and when they were little, and when their brain was developing. So how you behaved towards them, that meant that their brain developed in the way that it did. That is the power you've had. So it's sort of like a computer programmer saying, I want to get on well with this program. Maybe it's a robot. You know, I've created this robot and it's not happy with me. We both need to equally put effort into making this work out and listening to each other and all the rest of it. No, it's not like that, because the robot is who the robot is because of how it's been programmed. And that's the same with your child. Now, with your child, there's been other programmers too, not only you. They've gone to school, they've had other experiences outside of you. But these other experiences will not have had the same impact as the child's experience with you. For example, if you have built your child up, if you've always believed in them, if you've always treated them with respect, if their feelings have always been very important, you've always taken them seriously and so on, then what happens away from you is going to have less of an impact on that child, because they will have built up a really solid interior. You won't have tried to imprint yourself onto them. You will have listened and reflected back what you're hearing, what they're saying, what they're feeling and what their experiences are. So they will have grown up knowing that all of this is important. And that will mean that if somebody tries to bully them, it's not going to work, because they're going to be able to stand up for themselves. They're going to know what's true. They're going to know who they are. They're not going to be fooled into thinking they're any less than they are. They're not going to be attracted to bullies. They're not going to be attracted to abusive partners in the future. Have you noticed how when you pick up a baby, you mirror naturally the baby's expression? So if the baby's smiling, you will smile back at the baby. And if the baby looks upset, you will look upset. And the reason we do that is because that's what helps the baby to learn about who they are. By mirroring back their emotions, we're teaching them to take those emotions seriously and to know that that is what they're feeling. So you might do that to a baby because it's a natural instinct that we tend to have. But if you don't do that when a child is growing, it's going to cause a lot of damage to that child's self-image. So, for example, if the child hurts herself and cries and you say, "Oh, it wasn't that bad, come on, stop crying," then what you're doing is you're undermining what that child is expressing. So you're doing the opposite of reflecting it back to them. You're telling them it's not really happening. So you're saying your reaction is not based on reality. Likewise, if you tell a kid you're oversensitive, what you're doing is you're teaching them, as their brain develops, you're teaching them you can't trust your perceptions. My reality is reality, your reality doesn't count. That's what you say when you say that they're oversensitive, they're overreacting, or when you just don't take their feelings seriously. They're going through a phase, they'll grow out of it, all of that kind of thing. It's all, if that is something you express to the child, then that's what you're teaching them. And maybe that serves you in that particular scenario because it gets you off the hook. And you can blame the child for whatever's feeling uncomfortable in you at that time. But the problem is that you're programming them with that kind of reaction. So their brain says, so if I think that something's hurtful, I better not say anything next time. Or if I say something and the person dismisses it, I'd better believe them. They're probably right because my mum's right. And then they go out into the world and they get bullied and they get treated badly by other people. Because the problem is that children do trust their parents. They have to in order to survive. You can't question everything your parents say and their motives from when you're a toddler, or you just go insane. So children are programmed genetically to trust the caregiver. And so they believe what they're told. And that's what's so dangerous, is that power. It's kind of like being a hypnotist without necessarily realizing you are one. You might think your child is oversensitive, and you might, because you might have different responses to things. Very often we can be desensitized to something because we dissociate from it. So that's a result of trauma. So it's not healthy that we're so insensitive to that thing. And if a child is sensitive to it, there's probably a good reason for that. Children's emotions can be trusted because children, they don't have all of this baggage when they're little. So how they see things is a lot more trustworthy than how an adult sees things a lot of the time. So if you keep doubting how your child sees things, or if you have doubted how your child saw things, then you will have had a big impact on their ability to trust themselves. And that will have affected their self-esteem, their ability to have healthy relationships with other people, their ability to protect themselves and to be safe. So you could look at it like this. You could think, I've hypnotized somebody and they didn't want to be hypnotized to do that kind of thing. If you see it like that, then you'll see that the first thing you need to do is acknowledge how much power you've had in that situation and how much power you continue to have, because you're still the person who hypnotized them. And you'll also see that the first thing that needs repairing is trust. Not your trust in them. If you start looking at it like that, you've got everything the wrong way round. You need to think about their trust in you and how you have broken that trust. If you have needed something for yourself, if you've needed validation and reassurance from your child, then I can promise you will have broken that trust, because they will have had to have played the parent role and you will have put too much onto their shoulders. That can be something to think about. If you're a parent who doesn't know, have I done something or have I not done something to my child? Nobody has to know the answer. Just sit on your own with it and ask yourself, have I often put my own feelings first? Have you needed to be right? Have you had a lack of trust in them? Have you been excessively controlling? Think of the robot, if that helps. You're saying to the robot, I don't trust you. And the robot sees that as, that means I'm a bad person. If you pushed your child too far, if you expected stuff of them, and if you were only impressed with them if they did really well at something, then they will have learned that their worth depends on how well they do at something. CPTSD is a result of the cumulative effect of lots of little toxic events in someone's life. When a negative core belief is created and then triggered again and again and again, that's traumatic, and that kind of trauma can result in all sorts of mental health problems. So, for example, being put down a lot, being gaslit a lot and guilt tripped a lot, any kind of ongoing passive aggression from a caregiver when you're a child, any of those things would create trauma, and the same kinds of effects as PTSD. So they could stop somebody from sleeping, they could have lots of flashbacks, they could affect their progress at work or in university or school, they could affect their ability to have relationships with other people. And that's why it's important to think of child abuse as not necessarily being about some specific horrendous incidents, that everyone knows and talks about as child abuse, like child sex abuse. Don't underestimate the power of a behaviour you might have repeated many times on your child, even if you think that behaviour, it wasn't ideal, but it really wasn't that bad. And again, going back to the robot example or the hypnotist parallel, it's all about what the child then tells themselves after experiencing this. If you're always guilt tripped, you could believe, I'm a bad person. If I consider my needs, I'm bad. I have to put other people's needs first. And I'm a bad person, when you're told over and over and over again that, then that's going to create trauma in somebody. And all sorts of things can happen as a result of that. I tend to focus on people who go on to get abused after their childhoods. But there are also people who become the abuser because of their childhoods, you know, people who become bullies in whatever way. And it might be an extreme way that's dangerous to other people, or it might just be a way that constantly gets in the way in their lives. You know, maybe they have a habit of being rude and unpleasant to people, or maybe their relationships end up being short-lived, or maybe they just have a lack of trust in people, and so that's going to affect the way they are as parents. And the I'm a bad person core belief can create a bad person. There's a documentary on Netflix at the moment about a life coach. I think it's called The Psychopath Life Coach. And he talks about how he was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, and that throughout his childhood he believed he was a bad person, and so he then consciously became a bad person because that's what he thought he was. And the same goes for an unlovable person. Some people think no one's going to think they're unlovable unless they're thrown out of home, or not fed, not clothed, you know, they're not clean, they don't ever have enough of anything. But they can have all of those things and believe they're unlovable, completely unlovable, because it's about the attention they get from somebody, and somebody being able to give of themselves emotionally, somebody putting their feelings first, really considering their feelings, taking them seriously. Those are the things that make a child feel loved. Lots of situations where the child might be upset or angry and they're not listened to can then create the belief that I'm not lovable being triggered over and over again, and that creates trauma, and that trauma creates complex PTSD and all of the effects associated with that. People have been misdiagnosed with autism and ADHD because they actually have complex PTSD. So that shows what a profound effect it can have on someone's life. And if you think about it, if you believe you're not lovable and you keep creating situations where you're not lovable by maybe going after people who are unable to give emotionally to you, you know, they're emotionally unavailable, or getting bullied, you know, those kinds of situations that keep reinforcing this idea that you're not lovable that you got when you were a kid, that can, you know, create more and more trauma because more and more of these toxic events happen. Your child was never in charge of how your brain developed. That was your parents. If there was leftover rage at all the stuff that wasn't fair that happened to you, and if that rage was taken out on your children, then in whatever way, I'm not just talking about shouting, maybe smashing things or hitting them or that kind of thing. I'm also talking about passive aggressive rage, you know, the silent treatment, all of that kind of thing. If you were expressing that stuff because of what was inside you, because of whatever you went through yourself before they were born, you've passed that on to them. And it doesn't matter how old your child is now. I have had clients in their 70s with mothers in their 90s who are still terrorizing them. You know, and that's because they still in their 70s have these beliefs about themselves that they can't shake. And for that reason, when they think about their mother or when they hang out with their mother, it still brings up all of this trauma. And so it doesn't matter how old your adult child is, they will still be carrying trauma. And if we go back to the hypnosis parallel, maybe you can imagine how thinking about the person who hypnotized you, or especially being around them, could trigger the core beliefs they hypnotized you into believing. So that's why they might have chosen to protect themselves from being re-traumatized, to protect themselves from those old core beliefs that they've been trying to shake off by staying away from you. You can't be a safe person that it's healthy for your adult kids to be around if you continue to play the hypnotic recording that reminds them of their negative core beliefs. So if you plan to try to get back in touch with them, make sure that first of all, you've changed the way you think and feel about yourself and them. Most of this video has been about how you might have deeply affected your son or daughter, and now I want to look at what you can do about it. Tell them you understand now how negative beliefs about themselves could have come from your behaviour and the impact that might have had on their lives, and that you want to help them to heal by taking responsibility. And so you want to know about more of these behaviours, any behaviours you haven't listed that have hurt them. Make it clear that that's your goal, to try to mitigate the damage you've done to them. And that your priority is how they feel. That yes, you really miss them, you'd love to be in touch again, but that what matters most to you is how they're doing and how they feel and what's good for them, not what's good for you, not what your needs are. And you could even say that you regret that in the past your needs came first. If it makes you very sad to think of how much you've hurt them or how much you believe you may have hurt them, then you could also say that. Heartfelt messages do tend to come through. And as long as you're thinking about them and about wanting the best for them, and that's at the forefront of your mind, that'll come across in the way you write to them. In order to try to repair a relationship like this, you have to come to terms with the fact that they might not want to. And it's up to them whether they do or not. And so your goal needs to be that they heal, not that they have a relationship with you. As long as your goal is that they heal from what they've experienced growing up with you, then that's going to come across to them, because that's what they want too. Then you've both got the same goal, which helps a lot. They won't feel like your goal is about them meeting your needs again. They can make a choice about whether they also have you in their life or whether they don't. And at least you will be able to have a clearer conscience, because you will know that, yes, I screwed up a lot in the past, but I've really done everything I can to try to help my child now to manage all of this stuff that they've been trying to deal with ever since. I had lots of people getting in touch with me after my last video wanting to sign up for my course, and unfortunately there were tons of technical problems. First of all, about 2/3 of the people who got in touch didn't receive the email I sent to them. It wasn't delivered. There was some problem with Microsoft, I think. There have been lots of technical problems with the website, with booking onto the courses. So it's all just been quite a disaster. So I wanted to let you know that the technical problems are now fixed. You can book onto the course from the website. You can book from a phone as well as from a computer now. The website you need to go to for information about the course and booking the course is www.sanitysaved.com, which I thought was quite appropriate, given that what narcissists do to our sanity. The course is to heal from narcissistic abuse. I've written loads about it on the website. It's been a real success. I've run it 7 times now, but this is the first time I'm going to run it for a quarter of the price and with double the content. And I've done that because my other courses were small courses. I wanted to have as much one-to-one interaction with people as I could, so they had to pay over $1,000 because it was $100 per class per week. So it was a lot of money that they had to suddenly come up with. But I'm still going to do exercises in front of the class with volunteers. So you'll be welcome to volunteer to do those. And the exercises are really, really good. I'm sorry if that sounds like I'm blowing my own trumpet, but I'm telling you because I know they are. I've seen how well they work. They really are turning people's lives around. And it's because I've been able to create these exercises with one-to-one clients. So that means that over the years I've been able to hone them and make them really effective. So they're specifically for people who have experienced narcissistic abuse. They deal with things like guilt, excessive guilt, in other words, people having difficulties with boundary setting, difficulties with seeing yourself through someone else's eyes instead of being able to really fully believe in your own experiences and just stand in your own truth. They're exercises that encourage you to use logic instead of emotional thinking, but at the same time, I also use emotional thinking, but in a positive way, emotional thinking to strengthen ourselves instead of to get in our own way. So they help you to distance yourself from the things that might have made you scared or insecure, but at the same time to bring you closer to feelings that make you feel empowered. Straight after the class, there'll then be a Q&A, and you can ask any questions you want to ask to make sure you fully understand all of the exercises and what we're doing, and then you can go away, do them at home, and then the next class you can report back about how it went. So if you go to the website www.sanitysafe.com, it's a very cheerful website. For some reason the tropics just came into it. There are lots of creatures who I think want to say hello to you. It's a friendly place. So I hope you enjoy them and where they live, and I hope to see you on the course in January. So I hope that was helpful. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.